Back home again in Indiana, and it seems that I can see the gleaming candle.
What I learned from my experience at IU and the bike race is that you embrace what you think is the greatest risk. If you feel like you should take a risk, you should do it, because in the end, you're always rewarded for it, either personally or socially. So that's what I learned from that, not to be fearful of taking risks. As far as the race as a whole, I feel as though I was at school at the right time to be a catalyst for women to explore their boundaries.
Then I long for my Indiana home.
The role of women throughout the history of the Little 500 has changed dramatically. From sewing jerseys and decorating pits to riding tricycles and racing for egg beaters, the weekend for women was never about athletics. While the tricycle race involved some training, the Mini 500 was always more about participation than sport, and despite its apparent effrontery to female students, it continued to draw large pools of teams attempting to qualify.
You mean you ride tricycles? And they said, yes. I said, don't you think that's demeaning? Well, they didn't quite get it. They didn't know what I was talking about. And I would see these pictures of women students, and, you know, I didn't even want to talk about what it looked like. Real condescending kind of stuff. I call it the difference between walking around the pool in a bathing suit or diving into the pool and being a real swimmer.
The events reflected society, and as women throughout the 50s and 60s struggled for equal rights, the Little 500 drew little criticism. The women on campus were content with their role in the weekend. This began to change in 1972. As it moved into its third decade, the Little 500, having survived the protests of the 60s, was ill-equipped to meet an entirely new set of challenges brought on by its next generation of participants. The Education Amendments of 1972 contained landmark legislation known as Title IX, stating that federally funded programs cannot discriminate on the basis of sex. The following year, several women utilizing Title IX stepped forward in a political effort to challenge the race by attempting to register for qualifications in the men's event.
The major reason for prohibiting female participation is not because the steering committee is prejudiced against women or that they are blatant sex racists. The steering committee is concerned about jeopardizing the entire Little 500 program. The race is too strenuous for women, and a change in policy would have made it necessary to allow men to participate in the mini tricycle and canoe races.
The rejected riders sought legal counsel. Several days later, the Student Foundation reluctantly acquiesced, and the riders were allowed to attempt to qualify. As qualification day approached, it was discovered that one of their riders did not attend Indiana in the fall and was therefore ineligible to ride. The rule they violated had been on the books for less than a month.
Well, I think people were fairly annoyed. You try to change what's been just fine for years and years that everybody is happy with, and you get one or two people who aren't happy, and they try to change everything and make everyone uncomfortable.
We really didn't see how we would fit into organized sports, except for the mini. I mean, because it had already been set up for you. It was pretty simple. You just get on a little trike and you ride around. And a man coached you, of course. There were no women coaches coaching mini, so it was kind of it was a wonderful token for us.
3 years later, in 1976, Kathleen Surajeski finally broke the gender barrier, becoming the first female active member on a men's team and the first woman to train on the track.
Word got out that, hey, there's a woman practicing and she's on the track. And here came the IDS and here came the HT, the local newspaper here. And so this political whirlwind began happening about, oh, you know, why are you doing this? Why are you challenging? And I just want to race. I want to compete. And there's no women's teams, so this is the only game in town, so I would like to participate in this event.
Sarah Jeske remained an alternate for her team, watching the race from the pit. Another year had passed without a woman participating in the race. In 1981, the first all-women's team took the track to attempt qualification. The appropriately named double-take team fouled on their first two attempts and subsequently slowed for their third, missing the race by over 15 seconds.
We sympathize with and understand the desires of several of the women on campus, but we continue to maintain that there is already a race available to women, and if they feel so compelled to race in the Little 500, they are more than invited to attempt qualification.
In 1982, a men's team arguing the same right to qualify which the women had 10 years earlier successfully petitioned for entry into the Mini 500. 4 years later, the all-male independent team Who Knows won the race, disrupting the Student Foundation's 35-year argument about the Mini being the women's race. While men were now preparing for both races, two very separate factions were struggling to create a place for women in the weekend. Debbie Satterfield, a Bloomington-born cyclist, had helped coach her husband's Little 500 team in '83 and '84 and participated in several of the smaller cycling races the Student Foundation offered.
I wanted more women involved in racing. It was bigger than the Little 500. My issues were bigger than the Little 500. It was about getting women into bike racing.
From 1985 to '87, Satterfield spearheaded an aggressive campaign to demonstrate the interest of women on campus and the feasibility of a women's race. She organized training rides, filled out petitions, and wrote to other colleges across the state which had instituted women's divisions in similar events. Always a little on the fringe, in 1986 Satterfield created a women's independent team called the Stonies, honoring the stonecutters in Bloomington and playing off the outsider image of Breaking Away's cutter team.
I was probably looked on as a troublemaker, as stirring the pot and causing problems. And I think that sometimes the troublemakers are what brings about the change.
In 1987, while Satterfield and the Stonies were trying to organize a women's race, a strong group of cyclists from the Kappa Alpha Theta sorority had other plans.
We needed somebody to teach us how to ride. And while we were on those training rides, somebody just said to us one day, you know, you guys are really strong riders. Why don't you try and qualify for the men's race?
With very little support, the Kappa Alpha Theta team set their sights on the 37th annual Little 500.
Initial reaction was that this wasn't something that women do. The Little 500 is so entrenched, or was at the time period, as a men's race. And so when somebody comes in and says, I want to change this tradition, that's where you get the resistance. And it wasn't only the men. I mean, I don't want to say that it was a men versus women thing, because it wasn't. It was a lot of the campus against what we were trying to do.
On a windy, cold day in April 1987, Leanne Guzik, Darcy Fike, Kathy Cleary, and Martha Hincamp took the track along with 38 men's teams in an attempt to become the first women's team to qualify for the Little 500.
I remember taking the track, and after a team's name is called, there's a hush that surrounds the place.
While the Theta's individual lap times were competitive with the men, their lack of exchange practice resulted in fouls on their first two attempts. The Thetas were forced to anxiously wait until the end of the day for their final qualifying chance. While they waited, news quickly spread about their groundbreaking effort.
It felt like the whole campus was at the track, because between the time that we left after our second attempt, word got out that we were going to be trying our third attempt at the end of the day.
Forced to slow down in order to perform clean exchanges, the Thetas still managed to make history.
All of our exchanges were good, and so we made a successful qualifying attempt. And that for Little 500 and for the advent of the women's race was huge. At the end of the day, we got bumped, but so did 4 other teams, and they were all men.
The popularity of the Theta attempt, combined with the grassroots campaign initiated by Satterfield, had the power to make an immediate impact, yet the two groups remained at odds.
There was no reason for women to have to compete physically against men, because I thought that in 90% of the cases they weren't going to qualify. They were going to be denied having this experience. And even if, let's say, 2 teams in the next 30 years could qualify, what would that mean for the vast majority of women who wanted to compete?
We put together a meeting of other women riders, including some of the Thetas and Jill Janoff. I think it was Martha Hinkamp and Jill Janoff, and basically came together and discussed what is it we're looking for. And Phyllis brought validation to our request.
Once they all got together and realized that they were all on the same page for the same cause, everything else was put aside, and it was just about the event. And it wasn't about women's movement. It wasn't about equal participation with men. It was about creating an event that is long overdue.
On October 7th, 1987, 38 years after the men's race was created, the women on campus gained a bike race of their own. Held Friday before the men's event, the race would be 100 laps, half the distance of the men's. 6 months later, on April 22, 1988, in front of 12,000 people, 31 women's teams took the track. Many of the women responsible for the formation of the race attended the event. Kathleen Sarajeski coached a strong independent team, and Dr. Klotman made the opening remarks to the riders. Although Debbie Satterfield was no longer eligible to race, she coached a respectable Stonies team. Martha Hinkamp, a junior in eligibility, led her strong Kappa Alpha Theta team to the pole by over 3 seconds.
Here she comes by again, and she now has nearly about a third of a lap lead at the moment.
In a race similar to the first men's event, the pack spread out early, leaving many of the under-trained teams behind. Wilkie Sprint, an all-freshman dorm team, employed an aggressive strategy of frequent attacks and exchanges as they managed to hold off a late charge by the Thetas to win in 1:10:52.
As Wilkie Sprint, as you indicate, Doug, has won the first women's Little 500, and of course it has to be in record time.
There's nothing like winning that first year. The first year, everything was fresh and new, and I was 18, and we were the freshman team that beat the veterans of the race. You walked around campus after that race for the rest of the semester, and there was a lightness to your step and a smile on your face, and standing in that pit, watching our rider come in, Kirsten come in after she'd won, that was just a moment of sheer elation.
The race was an overwhelming success. After many years of sweat, struggle, and intolerance, the women had finally been given a chance to test their limits and expand their boundaries.